Hello, YouTube, and welcome to another wondrous YouTube video. Today, we're going to be talking about how to build Guardians in Joust Season 11. Uh, this class is relatively simple-ish in comparison to the other classes, especially there's a lot less variety in terms of like types of builds you can do. So we're going to be talking about more in general, just like what items are good and how you want to like roll out the base, and then how you're like what's going to guide your decision making when you're choosing different items. But there are going to be two different types of guardians we're going to talk about in this video. That's going to be the backline slash range guardian. So that's like your stuff that's trying to play from a distance. Your Atlases, your Charons, your Ganeshes, your like Mauis. You're probably not playing Maui, but your Yamojas, that type of Guardian that are going to try to play like a little bit further back. Your Fafnirs type of guys that are looking to be aggressive from range, don't have to commit their bodies as heavily to go in. And then we're also going to be talking about more of your Diver Guardians, who are those guys that are trying to like get really deep in there and kind of bust some heads, get real melee range, kind of like your Kuzenbos, your Bakakujiras, your Sobeks, your Terras, Jingchens, Ares, your Kulus, all those guys that are really trying to dive deep. And so because of those different gameplay styles, there's a lot to talk about in terms of like a lot of niche items that is going to be that are going to be more useful when you're playing either one of those styles. And there are going to be a lot of shared items, but we're going to be just talking about in general a lot of good items that you should be considering building, and I'll go over all the, like I said, the situations that you would build those items in. What's up, Maple? So the first thing we're going to talk about is our backline slash range guardian. So, like I said, these are going to be your guardians that are playing from range and casting abilities from a long distance away, not trying to like commit your bodies with like a Sobek pluck type of deal. And so that's going to be your guardians like Atlas, guardians like Charon, guardians like Fafnir, Ganesh, Khepri, your Mauis of the world, Sylvanas, and Yamoja be the main ones there. And the poster child I've got for this one, we got the build on, is going to be Atlas. Loves to play from range, just throwing his one out, getting pulls from a distance, and then committing with his melee range abilities when the opportunity arises. We're gonna go right in here. I've got a pretty nice and easy standard starting build. The idea is you're just going to go a starter item. You're gonna rush Gauntlet of Thebes, and then you get to choose whatever the heck you want. That's kind of the same shared sentiment among pretty much every Guardian build, is you get your starter item, your Thebes, and then you just buy whatever is going to be good situationally in the game. So Guardian's very open, very fluid type of builds. And we'll talk about now the items that I think you should be considering for more of that range style Guardian. That's not super heavy commit until they see an opportunity that really is worth committing to. So aside from the Thebes, there is that choice of the starter item. You may have noticed that I didn't say you just get Axe and Thebes, because there is some thought to put into when you decide which starter you want. There are three main starters that are really solid on these types of Guardians. Warrior's Axe I have up here because it's the most consistent one. Can't really screw this one up. Warrior's Axe, very good for trading in those early fights, and of course the upgrade Sundering Axe, incredibly strong for the same reason, trading in the late game fights, getting little swings of 300 health, and those are more than little swings. 300 heals and deal 300 damage, so 600 swing more accurately in health bar. Axe very good. Other options, you've got Conduit Gem, which is kind of just like a really good clear item. So if you drafted a comp that has really bad overall clear, like let's say you went Ho Yi, who wasn't the greatest clear with his Ricochet, you got Atlas, and then you've got, let's say you picked like a Warrior, and you went Something with lower clear, and let's take a quick look. Something like Achilles or Guan Yu, for example. Those gods have very poor clear in the early levels, and so you find yourself against like a Thoth and a Hachiman and like a Yamoja. You know, three characters that have very good clear. So if you find yourself in a scenario like that, you might need to think about picking up a Conduit Gem as your starter item, and Gem of Focus would be your finished starter there, which is very strong. But it's probably not going to find you the same consistency as a Sundering Axe would and Warrior's Axe will in that early game. So only build Conduit Gem in those niche scenarios, like the ones I just laid out, or the one I just laid out. Sands of Time is another starter you could go. Very, very good on these backline range characters. It is very nice to have that early CDR on that character, or on those types of characters. Makes it so you have to pick up a little bit less CDR, feel less inclined to grab more CDR too early into your build, because a lot of the time other items can be of higher value and they won't have CDR on them. So Sands of Time can kind of help shore up the difference there and really allow you to use your abilities all the time. And of course, the Mana Sustain, also really, really strong from Sands of Time. Warriors, or Guardians rather, run out of mana quite quickly when you can't build support starters, which you can't do in Joust. They removed that many, many eons ago. So that's why we're not talking about any of those. Otherwise, we'd be building them all the time. Also, Sands of Time has a little bit of power, and the true damage to minions is nice for the clear. Not anywhere as good as Conduit Gem, but it is an option. And the only other starter that you could really consider, these are the main three, is Tainted Steel. Can be good if you're against really, really heavy healing. We're talking about you're against like an E-Shell, or you're against an Aphrodite, a Hell. You know, there are very few gods that you would buy this for. If you're against like a Sheva and a Chang'e, I probably wouldn't buy Tainted. I don't think that healing is like that crazy. But if you're against some of those main healers, like Aphrodite, like Hell, like E-Shell, you could consider grabbing a Tainted. Uh, I'd say probably don't unless you're playing Cerberus, and Cerberus isn't one of the characters in the class here that we're going to be talking about. He's not really that ranged character like the ones we're discussing now. So probably lay off the Tainted and only build it if it's like really, really necessary. Like they have three forms of really heavy healing on their team. These are the main three you're going to be looking at: Conduit, Sands, and Axe. Axe being the most consistent, and as we just discussed, Conduit and Sands having some nice niche case scenarios in which you would build them. So, yep, you choose your starter. You grab your Glowing Emerald, which is your Gauntlet of Thebes. That's the only like non-negotiable item in this build. You like have to go Thebes on Guardians. That's kind of just their item. Gives 45 of each prot. The Aura prots as well. Gives you some nice HP5 and good health. Another option you could go is Prophetic Cloak. You could, swap out your Thebes and grab Cloak instead. But I wouldn't recommend it. I think Thebes is just way better than Cloak. Stacks way too quickly in comparison to Cloak. Like Thebes will stack in 5-7 minutes. Cloak is going to take 20 minutes at some points, even if you're playing a character that stacks it really easily, like Atlas or Charon. And just Cloak is just I don't love it. I don't love it. You can build it, but I will recommend you to build Thebes pretty much every time. Double Thebes on your team if you have two Guardians. It's just fine for me. If a Guardian and a Warrior, they both get Thebes. That's fine with me. I don't really care about the Cloak that much. But if you really want to play like a backline protection type of comp, then you can go Cloak and Thebes if you want together. Or just have one guy, just have the Atlas guy go Cloak and your Warrior guy goes Thebes, or your Atlas guy goes Cloak and then your like Terra goes Thebes, something like that. It isn't that bad, but I do find these to be more consistent and just better overall. So that's what I'm going to recommend you build as the core item in this build. So you just go your Axe/Sands/Tainted/Conduit, and then you get Thebes. And boom, you got your build. Everything else after that is completely situational. And I've got a nice long list of items here to talk about to finish off the rest of your build here. What you're mainly looking for from this backline range type of Guardian is you're looking to balance tankiness, good amount of cooldown, and counter build your opponents as best as you can. And depending on your gameplay style, you might need to mix in a little bit more damage into your build, or you might need to cut back on the cooldown to allow you to do more defensively, in terms of like maybe you purchase like a Shoguns for your team, which no longer has cooldown. Maybe you purchase Absolution against Ares, Talisman. Like we'll talk about all this situational stuff as we go by each item. But under the core items here, I've listed 3 of the most popular items that you're probably going to be building to round out this build, and you can be buying them in any particular order here. I'm just going to be talking about each one individually and how it will contribute to your build and when you'd want to get it early versus maybe considering getting it a little later. So Pridwin is the first item we're talking about here. Both forms of this Pridwin are going to be very useful depending on your character. More often than not, blue Pridwin is going to be what you're picking up on the ranged guardians in particular, because since you're a ranged guardian, you probably won't be in range to actually get the glorious Pridwin explosion. So that bigger shield will be a lot more impactful on your, your Atlas, your Charon, blah, 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 all those other gods that are ranged characters. But this item is just incredibly strong. Big burst of cooldown, has low protections, but that shield is very impactful for both dealing damage and protecting yourself. And it's just like a very nice item to go after Thebes if you have nothing else that you want to get. But it just gives you a little bit of everything you want. Thebes, ton of prots, Pridwin, a little bit more of those. Protections of both. Counter builds against pretty much anything that you're facing. Double fizz, double magical, triple fizz. Don't matter. Pridwin's really good. And then, yeah, that little extra burst damage goes a long way. So Pridwin, just super strong item that if you have nothing else that you feel like you need to build, you'd want to pick the Pridwin up. Just for that really nice cooldown spike. Helps a lot in Joust, where there's a lot of trading going on, so having cooldown is very valuable. Spirit Robe. Another item that you can build early on or later in your build, depending on how badly you think you need it. It is very good against those high hard CC engagement compositions. So you're against Sheva, you're against Uller, you're against Ho Yi. Those characters that are trying to get on you with a hard CC ability and then burst you down. Spirit Robe is incredibly strong against those type of characters, not only because of that massive mitigation spike you get when they hit you with that ricochet, when they hit you with that Uller axe, when they impale you into that on her pillar, but it's also giving you the CCR, crowd control reduction, to make that stun shorter. So you can get out quicker, and you get 35 of each prop from this guy, so really, really good for surviving. And so if you find yourself getting focused really heavily, for example, you're playing Atlas, and your team selects a double backline comp, like they pick like a Thoth and Hachiman, 2 incredibly safe characters, and then the enemy team has a Bacchus or a Terra, and they're really just running at you, trying to focus you down with their ults. They're Kabrakin trapping you, something like that. Going Thebes straight into Spirit Robe can be very valuable, because it'll just give you like maximum survivability. This is the item that you want to go if you really do find yourself getting ran at a lot, or you can see how, like, maybe you're not getting ran at yet, but you can see how you might be the one getting focused out in a fight. Spirit Robe straight after Thebes is going to be basically as tanky as you can possibly get. Our other closest to core item that's unnecessary, but you'll be unnecessary in every game, or not necessary in every game rather, but you'll be building a lot, is Midgardian Mail. Very useful against those auto attack warriors. Very useful against any auto attacker, really. ADCs really just like playing against Midgardian Mail. And it's super impactful in Joust, because a lot of the time you will be going against those auto attack characters because they're so good at shredding any target on the map. So they're very popular in the Joust meta. And this is the best item to combat an auto attacker, a crit auto attacker, a chin size auto attacker, it don't matter. The slow alone is just so strong against them. And the attack speed reduction also, of course, is very good. So the attack speed reduction, unfortunately, isn't always amazing, because especially late game against hunters that overcap attack speed, Midgardian actually won't slow their attack speed at all. So if you play against an enemy hunter that has like 2.5 attack speed, and then they also have like way over that because their teammates about like Shoguns, or they have a really strong stim, they'll still be at 2.5 attack speed probably, even through your entire Midgardian. And then if they use Sprint, then your Mid Guardian is completely nullified because you're not slowing them and their attack speed is still 2.5. So that kind of sucks about Mid Guardian. There's really no way to be tanky enough to survive anything as a Guardian late game. The closest you can get is by getting a lot of mitigations with like Spirit Robe and Cloak and Oni Hunter's Garb and all that. So you do have to be careful with building too tanky on these Guardians, but Mid-Guardian Male, especially early, you find yourself against a Hou-Yi Amaterasu combo, and you go Thebes straight into Mid-Guardian, you will be quite survivable for quite a long time. So hopefully you're seeing the trend here of like, if I wasn't against Hou-Yi and Ama together, maybe I could go Pridwin. Like I'm against more of a like standard composition. Maybe I'm against like a, I don't know, like a Raijin and Sheva and enemy Bacchus. I don't really need to go Midgard against that, but I might go Spirit Robe because there's a lot of CC, or I might just say, screw it, I'll just go Pridwin. I don't think they're focusing me out hard enough. So it really is just about the order in which you purchase these items. I'm just kind of giving you guys the skeleton of when you would want to get them early and if you'd want to get them at all. And these are just 3 of the most common ones. That's why I put them up here in the core. As for damage items, these are more items for when you feel like you're not getting pressured out too highly or heavily and you think you could return a lot in terms of offensive pressure. These types of items can be very useful for your team. You probably wouldn't build any more than 2 of these items in any given build. Realistically, you're probably only going to build 1 of them if you are building any of them at all. Chronos Pendant is the first one we're going to talk about. I really like going Chronos Pendant straight after Thebes if I don't find myself having a lot of pressure put on me, because this is just like an insane Guardian item. Guardians love their cooldowns, right? It's like the best thing. And if you go like Warriors Axe Thebes, you got a lot of health sustain, but not very much mana sustain. If you go Thebes into Pridwin, no mana sustain. So that's where your Chronos Pendant comes in. Will give you the best bang for your buck in terms of maximum cooldown reduction and getting the stats that you're missing in terms of that MP5 will allow you to stick around a lot easier with the Chronos Pendant. But you do have to worry about being too squishy. So you can get it later on in the build completely fine. Like if you end up wanting to go really tanky like this, and then you get the Chronos Pendant later, because those cooldowns are ever so impactful. Or if you, like I said, feel like you're not under too much pressure, you could get it early. Very, very nice Guardian item and shores up a lot of your stats. But as we keep talking about, it depends completely on the context of the game if you think you can get away from it or get away with it. And that is completely dependent on how you feel in the said game, on what items you can build and get away with that will feel really good offensively, but you can't do that offensive item buy if you think you'll get punished too hard. So you got to do a little bit of testing to see what feels good for you. That's going to take time. Another damage item that you could 100% go now, just recently got buffed, is Gem of Isolation. They buffed it so that you can essentially have 100% uptime on this item, and it gives you a 30% slow and 50% shield reduction. Very good against gods like Charon, very good against a team comp where you have an Odin on your team, so they're getting Phantom Shells, and you have slows as well as anti-shields, which the Phantom Shells are very good for, right? Big shields. Or if they have like a Geb or just really any type of shields. And even the slow is just really impactful. So characters like Atlas that can apply this really easily, characters like Charon that can apply this really easily, like Charon's 1 applies a 3-second dot, right? And that dot will proc this Gem of ISO twice. So Gem of ISO, very useful item right now in that kind of like situational slot where we're able to slide in a little bit of damage. It can help out your team a lot with chasing targets down and really annoy them. It's great. Another option, which is kind of the same as Gem of ISO, but like a shift in what it accomplishes, is Ethereal Staff. So you'll build this item when you're just really playing a poke game. So you're reaching kind of the later stages in the game. You're against 2 really beefy targets and a really squishy backliner, and you find yourself just like poking with Sundering Axe type of procs. And like if you're playing against a Jing Chen, this type of item becomes really valuable because Jing Chen will be getting upwards of 4,000 health. naturally through his passive and all the items he's building and just his natural leveling. So E-Staff will steal a whole ton of health from a Jing Chen. And so that can be a very nice item for you to build situationally. All of these damage items are very situational, and you, like I said, you only build really one of them or two of them if you really think you can get away with it. Divine Ruin is the last kind of like damage item that you'd be building. Very situationally, you could get that early or you could get it later on in the build. Would be a more accurate time to build it. That's when most people would build it. Like, you go your like core, get a lot of cooldown, and then you kind of like throw it on at the last one or two slots. Though, like I said, if you really do think you can get it early and get away with it, like you're against a really heavy healing comp and your team's just really struggling killing people, Divine Ruin is an option to go. Very good on these poker characters, these long range guardians that we're talking about right now, the Atlas, the Charon, that type of thing. Can apply Divine very easily, and it can apply it to a lot of targets. So it can be very useful if you're against a lot of healing. As for defensive options that are nice to pick up as those range guardians, the first two we have here are Gladiator's Shield and Genji's Guard. They kind of both serve a similar purpose in terms of these are for when you don't trust your team at all and you're trying to carry the game. Because Gladiator's Shield gives you a whole bunch of damage on your abilities and gives you a nice HP 5 to stick around longer. And gives you a little bit of a cooldown as well. And then the Genji's Guard just gives you the MP5 that you're lacking by building all this HP 5. Gives you more cooldown and then gives you the cooldown resets. So you're just like tossing out abilities as quickly as possible. And you have a lot of damage behind those abilities with the Glad Shield, and you've just got a lot of HP 5 and MP5. This build feels really good offensively. Where it falls short is when they're able to get on you and focus you out. You get Kabrakan caged and the Hou Yi drops his ult, marks you, ricochets you. You have very little survivability against that. If you had built Spirit Robe, get a nice Spirit Robe proc against that kind of combo. You had built Pridwin for a big shield. You had built Midgardian to slow down the Hou Yi when he's trying to all-in you like that. You'd feel a lot nicer. But if you really feel like you need to carry, and you're not getting focused out that much, you can go a very aggressive Glad Shield Genji's type of build and be able to get out a lot of abilities really often. So that's when Glad Shield and Genji's become very useful, is when you just find yourself in a position where you're able to kind of like free cast. And so those are really nice, like kind of luxury purchases in terms of you really thinking that you're going to be able to be sneaky and they won't be able to punish you for it. So that's up to you when you go those items, just like everything else. Two other items that you could go that are much more helpful for your team, completely the opposite of the Glad Shield Genjis, are Void Shield and Void Domaru. So if you have a Guardian comp with an Atlas, and then you've got two physicals on your team, for example, like an Amaterasu and a Marticarus, and you're really just trying to like baby the ADC and just kill people with Chin Size and Marty combos, you might want to pick up a Void Shield relatively early, because you have very fizz-heavy comp there. And you're just trying to make it so your physicals kill as quickly as possible. On the flip side, you could find yourself getting Void Domaru if you're running a double Guardian comp with Atlas and Kuzenbo, and you find yourselves really being able to dive the backline, and your Kuzenbo went like Pridwin, he went like Mystical Mail, he went like Archdruid Fury, which are all magical sources of damage. Void Domaru can help increase that DPS by a lot. Moving on. In the relic section and the consumables section, we kind of ran out of slots because there are a lot of good items for Guardians to purchase depending on different situations. So we kind of just filled out the rest of the slots here with different defensive options. Though we will be talking about relics still, because relics are very important on Guardians. But anyway, I digress. Breastplate of Valor is a useful item in very specific scenarios. I see people build this item a little bit too much, because it is a very good feels good item. Particularly when you're against compositions that have become much more meta these days, with you play a warrior or an assassin with a hunter, and then you put a guardian on top. So very fizz heavy comp. It can be very attractive to slide straight into that breastplate of valor. So yep, I'm against the double fizz. The magic damage is low. Let me get a breastplate. A lot of the time, I find the breastplate to be a little bit useless, guys. I'm not gonna lie, in terms of surviving. I would only really purchase breastplate if you think you can get a lot of traction out of either of the two glyphs here. So, breastplate of vigilance reduces auto attack damage when you ult, and it applies in an aura around you when you cast that ult. So if I drop my Atlas ult, a 60 unit aura around me will spawn, which is just longer or just wider than the range of your average jump. 55 units on like an on her jump for instance, if you're trying to get a visual on the range of this item. So it's quite large. Will likely be hitting your whole team as long as you're playing relatively close together. And it will reduce auto attack damage from enemies by 25% for 5 seconds. So this type of item is really, really good against crit and against just auto attack damage in general. So if they got a lot of auto attackers, you can get a lot of use out of this. But you can also get a lot of use out of Midgardian Mail. So you got to really pick and choose what you're going for here. And when you're picking up the breastplate, you might be losing out on a Pridwin, or you might be losing out on a Chronos pendant. So you really got to be careful choosing what you're looking for. Oh, we got some bots to ban. Fantastic. Little bandage. There are a lot of Smite bots going around these days. I don't know why. Picked up a lot. As for the other breastplate glyph, this breastplate glyph is really, really solid for the movement speed in particular. It's been nerfed a bit to where it isn't as strong as it was last season. It got a big buff and became like super duper strong, and everyone was building it on like every god. But this item is still good even after the nerfs. And I do find that the movement speed is really valuable. It's got some really interesting interactions in that when you get hit by chin size damage, like any type of yellow damage will stack the breastplate passive. So if you take damage from chin size, it'll actually stack the physical side of this. And then, of course, any ability you get by will also stack it. But going off of the fact that chin size stacks the physical side, I would imagine that like stuff like Soul Reaver also stacks the magical side. So you can get this thing to proc really quickly. So if you're against a lot of ability damage, and you imagine yourself being able to get this stacked up nice and easy, get 100%. Think about going the breastplate. But like I said, just know you're missing out on options that might be making you more survivable and might be more helpful to your team overall. And know that you could get cooldown items of similar fashion or of similar weight in Pridwin and Chronos Pendant, which I find very useful. You could be getting those instead. So, you know, just test it up, test all this stuff and see what you like more. Absolution. Incredibly nice item in very niche scenarios. If I'm playing Atlas, I got no CC immunity. They play Ares. I'm either buying beads or I'm getting pulled. Unless I have Absolution. So I'm against an Ares dodge E-comp. I'm thinking I'm going Absolution straight after Thebes. Can be very, very useful to counteract those ultimate-based characters that are just trying to focus you out. Like, you could even use this in a scenario where you're against, like, a Kabrakan and a Hou-Yi combination, where they try and all-in you with their ults, and you just drop your ult, and then you just walk out of it with, like, a sprint, because you're CC immune, and you can just run around it after you have the Absolution proc. So Absolution, a very, very nice item in a very, very niche scenarios against team comps that can really, really focus you out. And you probably only want to be building it on very specific characters like Atlas. Right as you drop down the Atlas ult, the Absolution procs. Right as you slam down your Bacchus ult, the Absolution procs. But like on Charon, you're not going to get that Absolution proc until after he throws the wave. So pick and choose your characters carefully with the Absolution. That's what I'm saying here. But yeah, can be very useful. Talisman of Energy. Very useful item for giving your team big buffs of movement speed and attack speed. You can build this right after Thebes. You could build this late in the build when you just feel like you have an open slot, you don't need anything else, just slap a Talisman of Energy, you're feeling good. This item is incredibly strong in Joust because you're so close together and it solves everybody's mana problems. Your warrior will very much appreciate that if you have a warrior. Your assassin will very much appreciate that. Everyone loves having Talisman of Energy on their team, especially when they don't have to build it. So Talisman of Energy can be a very nice item to pick up if you don't feel like you need anything else, or if you just want to just super abuse movement speed, and they've got some magical targets, 2 magical targets out of the 3, that you can really make use of the magical protection against. Erosion, and I don't have enough room for it, but all the items in this tree are kind of very nice in different stages. Abyssal Stone, not exactly the greatest, so we'll talk more about these 3. But Erosion, incredibly good against shields, of course. If you're against Charon, they build a lot of shells. You're against, yeah, mainly those 2 things. You're against an Odin, who is a character that kind of relies on his shield for a lot of his survivability. Erosion can be very good. But as we talked about earlier, you could also just be going Gem of Isolation. You could go both of them together, and they'll have really small shields. If you're against a Nike, maybe you go Gem of Iso and Erosion and Sunder, and she just can't play the game. You go Horrific too? Yep. The Nike's never going to have her old shield, man. So, Erosion, very particular. Just really only you would get it against heavy shielding, and that's a pretty nice item to go specifically right after Thebes. Let's say, like I said, they played Charon and Nike together, and they built a shell, or they have a Geb. Going Thebes straight into Erosion can be really nice. Or if they end up going more shielding later on in the build, Charon 2 becomes more potent as he levels up and gets more health. You could get an Erosion later on down the road. And so, like all these items, it's just all situational when and where you build them. Stone of Binding, you build literally anywhere in the build. It gets more effective as you level up, but it's more effective early because they have lower prots. Really good when you're hitting a squishy character. Level 20, it's reducing prots by 16 of each. So it can be useful if you don't feel like you need any other item. And the best thing about Stone of Binding, at least from my perspective, is it has a lot of stats aside from that passive. The passive is nice, but you get prots of both and you get health. Prots of both health, or prots of both items with health are just amazing. Like, that's one of the main reasons why Thebes is so good. It's 45 of each prot, and it gives you some health, and it gives you HP 5, and it gives you the 10 prot aura of both types. So, like, Thebes is just like a glow-up Stone of Binding. That's why we always get Thebes. But Stone of Binding is a nice option to consider. If you want more of a selfish option to deal more damage, Archdruid's Fury is another solid item to pick up. Can get it on Atlas, get it on Fafnir, and then, like, you're just trying to finish off a carry, but you just don't have any abilities, but you are right next to them. You get an Archdruid proc with max stacks, you just go bonk, 300 damage, they die. So, Archdruid Fury, very nice if you're trying to just stir up a really powerful auto attack to finish someone off. Usually not super impactful or necessary or at any point useful on these type of characters, but in very specific scenarios where you're finding yourself on the carry character towards the end of fights, or they have 2 carries and only 1 tank, Archdruid's Fury can be quite useful. Next up is Prophetic Cloak. Like I said, this kind of would replace Gauntlet of Thebes if you didn't feel like going Thebes for whatever reason. If you're just one of those guys that it's like, I can stack the cloak really easily, I'm going to get the cloak, even though it's still going to take me 3 times the time at the least to stack this versus a Thebes. You could go Cloak. It's got a really good passive. It's much nicer for your teammates than it is for you, just because it takes so long to stack the darn thing. But when it is stacked, it is technically better, right? It gives more prods, gives the mitigations, which is how you survive in the late game versus burst. And, like, no number of protections is saving you from the Executioner Chin Size Hunter, Mitigation might, though. So, Cloak is an option. Pestilence. Really good against healers. If there's a lot of healing, you could get it straight after Thebes. Any other point? I don't know. Like, the latest you'd get this item, I would say, is right after Thebes or the item after. Because if you're buying it at any later point, you either didn't actually need that Pestilence, or you trolled and you really should have bought it earlier. So definitely more of an item to buy earlier on. You can make your warrior or your other tank, if you have a secondary tank, grab it. Can be very nice as well. But gives some nice HP 5, unlike most of the magical defense items, which give MP 5. So Pestilence really good against heavy healing, though like we talked about with Divine, there are other options to get your anti-heal that could be nicer for you. That Divine Ruin, Horrific Emblem gives anti-heal. Healing in general is not as potent as it used to be, so you're only really needing to build it versus characters that heal a lot, like Aphrodite and Hel and Ishel are the main 3 that come to mind when I think of healers. Or if they just have 3 characters that heal like a decent chunk, you might consider purchasing this or Divine. Shogun's Kasari, really, really incredible item when you have a hunter on your team. that is the main condition for Shogun's Kasari. It just feels so incredible for your ADC. And you wouldn't understand that unless you've either talked to your ADC player or you've been the ADC player. When your tank grabs you with Shoguns, it feels so good. 30% attack speed. In an aura, 55 units is incredible. Or 70 units even. That's massive. The only thing is, it doesn't really make you that tanky. It does give you that MP5 though. So getting Shoguns as early as possible. I really like this on a character like Fafnir, where you already have an attack speed buff in your kit, and you can stack the Shoguns on top of it. Feels so nice. As always, though, you do have to think about what your other teammates are building. So if you have a secondary tank on your team, if you have like an Amaterasu or a Bellona or a Gilgamesh or an Osiris, they might feel good building the Shoguns themselves. In which case, if you have one of those characters, auto attack warriors, and a hunter on your team, you could have one of you guys get the talisman and the other guy get the Shoguns. Because honestly, building them to both feels kind of bad, especially when the other team has a physical focus comp. But if you can split it up and get both, your ADC will be very, very pleased with you. So Shogun's very, very nice. And it can be a little useful for you too. This is a 40% attack speed buff for the guy that buys it. So like, Atlas has a very slow attack chain. With Shogun's Kasari, that speeds up by quite a bit. So like, you can find some nice niche uses for that. And then last but not least, Relic Dagger and the other items in this tree are very, very nice. Specifically, Winged Blade and Relic Dagger are 2 items that you should consider purchasing depending on what type of build style you're going for. Winged Blade, if I find myself against an Ares combination or composition, if they go Ares, they go Osiris, they go Hel, like characters that can really slow you down and make you stop playing the game for long durations. Particularly Ares, because the chain is just so annoying for you, right? As Atlas. Though for Ares, you'd want to go Abso. If you have teammates with CC Immune ults, you could get away with just going beads yourself and then delaying Absolution for later in the build, and you could be getting Winged Blade here. But this item is just really, really good against heavy slows. That's what it is. Like if they got Horrifics, and Atlas is a character that can immune the slows, but he can't immune all of them, right? So they got a lot of heavy slows to focus you out. Winged Blade is an incredible purchase to go for. And then Relic Dagger, on the other hand, is also a really good item if you have really good relics and really impactful relics. A lot of the time, you don't need Relic Dagger because you can just wait the extra 50 seconds for your relic to come up. Relic Dagger, I find, is very, very impactful when you have a relic like Bracer. Because you can have 2 bracers on the map at any given time if you purchase Relic Dagger. Otherwise, you can only have 1 bracer on the map at a time, and they'll be spaced out by... You'll have 10 seconds of downtime when you don't have a bracer. So, I really do find Relic Dagger an item that you really only are heavily considering when you have bracer. And when you do that, you would get Eldritch Dagger, because it'll make it so you can see wards when you place down bracers. So you're basically at that point a walking sentry ward. You drop your bracer, and then you kind of like walk around in the jungle and see if they have any wards. It also gives you a little bit of extra pots. 15% extra, that's more than a little bit. For 20 seconds. That's an eternity of time to go around and find those wards. So if you're playing a game where a lot of the fights are happening in the jungle, Bracer can give you immeasurable value. because you basically just have free sentry wards, and you are a free sentry ward. And you'll be moving faster and having more power while you're taking those jungle fights. So, can be very powerful to combo that Relic Dagger with that Bracer. And that's gonna about do it for the items. I've gone over them very thoroughly. Hope you guys have gotten a nice insight into when and why you would build one item versus another. And now we're going to talk about relics for these characters. Pretty much all of these relics are valuable in very niche scenarios. The only one that's not, or only ones that are not, would probably be Divine Barrier, because that relic just kind of sucks, and Teleport. Probably it. Just would never really buy Teleport, unless it's for the meme. Aegis, good against Achilles. End of story. Blink, good when you're really committing to a dive comp. Though you would probably not be buying Blink as often on like Atlas and these other ranged Guardian characters, just because you're trying to play the range of the character and you're just trying to focus down frontliners and make them really killable for your teammates. But depending on what you're against, it can be very useful if you're going against a double backline comp like Thoth and like Hachimon, for example, where it's really hard for you to close the distance and you're decided that you want to just like run past their tank and go for them. That's completely fine. Going Blink can help you a lot with that. Bracer. We've been over the Bracer. Very, very good combo with Eldritch Dagger. I think if you're going Bracer, you really do want to get Relic Dagger at some point in your build. You don't have to get it super early, but you can get it later on. And you want to upgrade this Bracer to the maximum variant of it as soon as possible, because it's just kind of worthless until you get the maximum Bracer. So definitely high priority on that, but can be very useful for just buffing your whole team. Stuff that buffs your whole team is really good in Joust. Like when we went over Talisman, when we went over Shoguns, going over Bracer now, those things are so good in Joust because it's just a walking team fight everywhere, right? And you're always playing for pressure over buffs, pressure over Bull Demon, pressure over, anything, over the tower, over the Phoenix. These things that buff your whole team, make them move faster in particular, are incredibly, incredibly useful. Cloak of Meditation, really, really good if you have multiple teammates that are trying to reset their cooldowns. You've got you're diving with a Sun Wukong on your team. Meditation, really good. You're diving with a Sun Wukong, you're diving with a Serket, you're diving with an Uller on your team, you're diving with an On Her. These guys really, really benefit from having their cooldowns reset. Meditation, absolutely massive. Love Meditation. And it even has a nice little heal even at the base levels. You can upgrade this to the maximum rank as soon as possible, or you can just kind of let it chill, let it upgrade to the T2, and then upgrade it with the 500 gold in pocket on your own after you get it. But you do want to get this to maximum rank soon-ish. If you go at first relic, you could try and get it after you finish your Thebes. That's what I used to do. But now with relics upgrading for free, it can be attractive to upgrade this after it does the first upgrade, or you can just buy it as your second relic, immediately upgrade it to T2, and then stack it by dealing damage and applying CC to T3. So meditation is just really good. You just have to build it, or you typically want to build it if you're playing with a team that really does well after resetting their cooldowns. So like I might not build this as much if I'm playing with like a Ho Yi or like a Kurnanos. Like I'm not seeing the big value there from those cooldowns, or from like, meting my Amaterasu isn't going to probably do that much. But if I'm meting my Nike, I'm meting my Guan Yu, I'm meting my Uller, it's going to feel pretty good. I'm meting my Medusa that just dashed in. It's going to feel real nice to have those CDR resets. Divine Barrier, don't build it. It's bad. Sprint, one of the best relics in the game mode. It is so safe. The safest combo you can leave the base with at the start of the game, if you're running a double frontline comp, is Sprint and Horrific. Because this will give you a ton of kill potential, and Sprint will give you a ton of safety. And it'll counter the Horrifics. So it's just an incredible item. You can combo Sprint with Blink as well. Once you get both of them upgraded, you can root Sprint somebody into your Flame Blink. It can be very useful. And then, of course, it gives attack speed now on your Heavenly Wings. 10% at base. And then when you get the root Sprint, you get 25% attack speed. Really nice. Horrific Emblem, we just kind of touched on this. Really good for getting kill potential on targets that don't have slow immunities. Though when people see you get horrific, they will probably be getting sprint. And when I start a game of Joust, I almost always want to have a sprint on my team over a horrific. If I have the choice between either we have one sprint or we have one horrific and we can't have the other one, I'm probably taking sprint every time, just because it can counter the opponent's horrifics. So keep that in mind. That being said, horrific is one of the only ways to make yourself survivable in terms of like actually surviving burst from an opposing like ADC mainly, or an opposing auto attack warrior, because the upgrade on horrific reduces damage dealt by the targets that are hit by it by a percentage, and it's uncleansable, and it lasts for 5 seconds. So it kind of is like damage mitigation when it's upgraded. So very, very powerful in the late game if you can be like you blink in and then you horrific the backliners. They will not be dealing much damage at all to any particular targets for 5 seconds, which is a long duration for a team fight, and can give you a big advantage. So horrific, just very killer in that late game, even if it gets sprinted off, as long as they actually fight you. Shell, I've been leaning away from Shell, but Phantom Shell, if you need the Phantom Shell, can sometimes be necessary. If you find yourself against an Odin and you are Charon, you are buying Magic Shell. This item is very good at bailing you out in tough scenarios, but you really only want to get it if you need the Phantom aspect of it, for the Kabrakens, for the Odins of the world. If they pick Ymir, maybe you think about it. Sometimes it's avoidable. If I'm Atlas and I'm against Odin, for example, I might not feel the need to pick up Shell, because when he ults me, I'll ult him back. And I'd rather be the guy with the Atlas ult than the guy with the Odin ult, if I'm being honest with you. So that does depend as well on the other characters on the team. So think about when you want to pick up that Shell. Your carries can pick this up too. Like, you don't always have to be the one to pick it up. It is nice to have multiple if they do have like an Odin or a Kabrakan or something, and you guys have trouble escaping the cage. So, just only buy Shell if you need Phantom, basically. Beads, really, really good item when they have a team comp that can just focus you out and shred you in a matter of seconds, particularly in the late game. If they have an Ares, if they just have any hard CC ability that they can then follow up with a bunch of burst from Hunter autos that have chin size, like we've been talking about, there is nobody tanky enough to survive late game. Doesn't matter the build, doesn't matter the god, you will die in the late game getting hit by a Hunter for an extended duration of time. 3 to 5 seconds, you're dead. So beads could just be your answer to saving yourself there. Or if you're a non-CC immune guardian, going into an Ares or a Dodgy. Really important to have beads in those scenarios. Thorns, probably not building this one too often, but it does give you 15% damage mitigation, which is the main part about it that you like. And it returns a lot of damage if you can actually get it to hit on an enemy carry, though they are usually pretty good about dodging it. I would not really be building this very often on the type of Guardian we're talking about, which is kind of the backline Guardians, the ones that are playing from range, because they're usually not going to be in range for the Thorns. So you probably aren't buying this, but it can be useful in very niche scenarios when you think you could hit some squishies with it. Sundering Spear, really good if you're against heavy tank compositions, and really good when you're against shield compositions. Really, really good against Charon, really, really good against Odin, Nike, and even if they don't have shields, if you just want to make your teammates do as much damage as possible, Sunder is the way to go. And getting that Sunder upgraded is paramount. Kind of the same way that getting Bracer upgraded is paramount. It just has such a big glow up when you level it. And then Teleport, we aren't buying that. Only other thing is glyphs, or not glyphs. Consumables. You can get 500 pots after you finish your whole build. You probably aren't just buying you just aren't buying potions unless you're pretty much at the end of your build, or if you're just looking for like a really cheap power spike, you could get a early 500 pot, but other than that, you're only buying 500 pot and 3k defense pot. And then wards are really useful. All these types of wards are useful on supports. And Chalice of Healing is a very, very important consumable to talk about. You really want to be picking this up at some point in your build. It just gives you so much sustain. You're rolling out the base with multi-pots and health pots, but as soon as you have 300 gold that you can just throw away somewhere, you want to purchase that Chalice. Like, a good time to purchase it, let's say you finish your Thebes and you have, let's say you're planning on going Glad Shield. Second, you have Thebes and T1 Glad Shield. You back, you have 500 gold, which can afford you the T2 Glad Shield. I would, in that situation, rather buy a Chalice. That Chalice is going to last you the rest of the game. A T1 to T2 isn't exactly the biggest glow up for most items. And I'm just going to get so much out of that Chalice. So just getting that Chalice whenever you have 300 gold to comfortably spend is very important for Guardians. And that's going to do it for our long-range Guardians. Hope you enjoyed that one. That was a lengthy talk. It's been 50 minutes. We talked about most of the things you want to talk about for Guardians. Now we're going to talk about the Diver Guardians, and we're going to make this one a little bit quicker because they're going to have a lot of shared items here. These Diver Guardians are going to be the ones that are trying to get up close and personal. It's going to be your Areses of the world, your RDOs. I think Athena, I didn't mention, she can play either of the two roles, the Divers or the Backline guy. Bacchus, Baka Kujira, Kabrakan, Cerberus, Kulu. Geb can do this. He can play either role. Jormungandr is very up close and personal. Kumba can play either role. Kuzenbo is our kind of poster child for diving. Sobek as well. Terra can do it. Jing Chen can do it. And Ymir is just kind of in an awkward spot where you don't even really want to pick that god. But you could do either role with this guy. But we're going to talk about the Diver Guardians through the lens of a Kuzenbo. Since we already talked about most of the stuff in the first build, if you guys are here just for the Diver build, watch the other build first. Just do it, because I'm going to skip over a lot of the information we already digested, since it's kind of the same type of information that we're going to be going over. Much of this is shared knowledge. So the starter choice, if you want starter choice, go watch the first build. There is a link. There will be timestamps in the description if you need to go watch that first build. The start is the exact same, and core items are almost the exact same. So we talked about the Thebes, we talked about when Pridwin's good, talked about when Glad Shield. We talked about most of these items when they're good, but we'll do a brief rehashing. Pridwin, when you need nothing else after you finish your Thebes, you can grab your Pridwin. Just feels really good for that cooldown spike that you are going to be a little lower on mana. So good cooldown, good prots from Pridwin if you want to go that. So you can build that at pretty much any point in the build and it'll be really good. Since we are talking Diver Guardians, Glad Shield is as close to a core item as we're going to get when we're talking about things that are not Thebes and not your starter item. So if you are exclusively looking to dive, Glad Shield is a very solid option to deal a little bit more damage. Midgardian Male, still really strong against those auto attackers, those hunters, those auto attack warriors. Really good for peeling for yourself. Damage items, still got Gem of Isolation. Really good on characters that can apply it easily. Kuzenbo kind of is one of those characters, but I'd like that more on different divey guardians like Jing Chen, who can use his one, apply the Gem of Iso, and this thing lasts for 4 seconds with a dot. So it'll apply the Gem of Iso again later. You can use it on stuff like Kulu, stuff like Jormungandr is really good with it. And you just kind of have to mess around with different characters and see which ones you like the Gem of Iso on. Chronos Pendant, incredibly good for divers. Steals a lot of cooldown. You can build it with Pridwin if you just want to be diving constantly, like this. But like we talked about in the last build, you don't want to commit to too much damage unless you really think you're going to be able to get away with it. E-Staff, really good if you're playing those poke trades. So you could throw Kappas at tanks, get a couple of E-Staff procs, and then dive the enemy Thoth with, the 400, 500 extra health you're going to have. Really, really powerful in those scenarios. Genji's Guard. You could also go Genji's as a defensive item that ends up giving you more damage because of the cooldown resets. Really good diver items. We talked about it in the last build. If you want to commit to more of a just carry-esque style, Glad Shield and Genji's are really solid, and so it only makes sense that your Diver Guardians are going to have that as two of their stronger items, because you just want to dive in and carry the fight. Here's the idea behind these types of characters. As far as defensive options go, Stone of Binding, really strong for those divers, because you're trying to get to the squishies when you're diving, and Stone of Binding reducing protections by a flat amount is very useful for that. Mystical Mail is just, just a bunch of extra damage without building a power item. So this is one of the stronger items if you can fit it in. If you are, like we said, going for that exclusive diving aspect. Mystical can be super strong. And Void Domaru also combos very well with Mystical to increase your damage. Since we are Guardians, we are dealing magical damage, and we are diving, Void Domaru is probably something that we want. Particularly if you have 2 magicals on your team, Void Domaru will be in your best interest to have on one of you. It increases your base damage, all your abilities. Increases your Pridwin damage, it's magical damage. Increases your mystical damage, that's magical damage. Glad Shield's physical, but a lot of these items do magical damage, and of course your character's doing magical damage like we said, so Void Domaru, incredibly important to have on somebody. Relic Dagger, if you're going like a very high impact relics, we talked about Relic Dagger, really good with Bracer, but you could use it if you just want to harass people with constant blinks. Like you're playing against characters that really struggle against blink, for example, and you're playing a really good diver like Kuzenbo. If you can fit a Relic Dagger in your build somewhere, you can make your dive real nice. The only thing you have to worry about is if you don't have enough damage to actually kill that guy that you're constantly diving. So if you're solo diving, you probably don't want to pick up Relic Dagger, because it is definitely in your best interest to get a different item that will help you kill them. But if you are dual diving with, say, a Kuzenbo and a Horus, having Relic Dagger on both of you can make it a lot more attractive to go, because together you'll likely be able to kill a single target a lot easier with having limited damage dealing options in your build, because Relic Dagger, of course, is only offering you CDR, movement speed, some HP, and CCR, right? The main thing is the relics. It's not giving you like a bunch of extra damage like Mystical or Binding or Void Domaru or a power item or explosions or Pridwin or Glad Shield damage, nothing like that, So you have to make sure that you're already able to kill the targets you're going after if you're going to build Relic Dagger on these guys. Really useful with Blink, really useful with Thorns, and we'll get to those later. Archdruid Fury, as we've been talking about, these Diver Guardians are really trying to get those defensive items in their builds that allow them to kill. Archdruid, a perfect addition. There you're just soaking up a lot of damage through while you're using your abilities, and then you just go whoop, 300 damage with your little Kuzenbo auto. Talisman of Energy is another option. Really healthy buffs to your teammates. It just allows all of you to move together well, so if you're diving with a teammate, can be exceptionally good to have Talisman of Energy. Pestilence, only if you're against really heavy healing. You could alternatively get Divine Ruin, which is an item that I probably should have in here somewhere. Breastplate of Valor, if you're against a very physical heavy comp, can be useful. But like I said in the last variant, or the last build variant, for those long range Guardians, I personally veer away from the breastplate and opt to get my MP5 and cooldown from stuff like Chronos Pennant, or just get heavy cooldown and good prots from Pridwin. Because the breastplate just isn't giving me the same value, in my opinion, as those other options. And you can get MP5 elsewhere. But it is an option. If you think you can make good use of the breastplate glyphs, go for it. If you're against a triple fizz team, go for it. If you're against a double fizz team and a Guardian, though, it's tempting to go it, but I would try to avoid it, though you can do it. Other options are Spirit Robe and Mantle. Mantle is an incredibly strong option for a diver, because let's say you get into a really, really close fight. The guy's got 100 health, you got 100 health. Well, it's probably going to be a little bit more than that. But more like you've got like 400 health and he's got like 800 health because he's a carry and you're squishy, or you're a tank, and you're getting much lower. This will probably proc more around like when you're 1k health, let's be honest. Your mantle procs, and it might give you that little extra stun to catch them off guard that'll allow you to stall just enough time to either escape or to finish the kill. Spirit Robe, really solid if they try to turn on you and CC you off. Spirit Robe can provide you a lot of protections. Really good at with stacking among other mitigation stats, like Kuzenbo's passive, like Bacchus's passive. Really, really solid. So these are good situational ones to pick up. Though you do want to be focusing more on your yellow numbers. That is the main component of these Diver Guardians. Is you're trying to kill the backlines with yellow numbers, whether that be Thorns, Pridwin, Glad Shield, Mystical. Increasing those yellow numbers to avoid Domaru. You need to get those online quicker, as quickly as possible, and then you can consider going into some more like heavy defensive armor options that will maybe help you survive just a little bit longer, or to get that kill, or whatever you're trying to do with it. As for relics, it's kind of the same deal as when you purchase relics on the other any guardian. So if you want to watch the relics, a breakdown of every single relic and when I think you should build each one, go back in the video and watch the other build where I talked about the relics there. So I'll just touch on the main relics you go on these divers. Blink, of course, you're diving. You're melee, trying to dive, likely a ranged character. You're getting blink. Med, really good for resetting. I blink in as a Kuzenbo, push him around, dump my load, use my 2, it resets my CDs, and then I need more CDs. Med, huge. Sprint, always good. Horrific, always good. They're just two of the most consistent, best relics. Shell, probably not getting that. Someone else is getting it, but if you really need the Phantom, you can grab it. Thorns, very good diving relic. Blink and Thorns are probably the most common diving relics. So you can sub Thorns for Horrific if you want more consistency out of your dive. Blink and Horrific, if you just blink Horrific a carry, like they just have to do something, right? Like if I just blink Horrific a Thoth and then throw a Kappa at him, he's moving at like 0.6 miles per hour. And then like he has to dash, or he's just getting beat down by me and the Guan Yu that are diving him, right? And then we can chase him easier because he's really slow. So you can get beads with that. You can take a lot of less damage when you're doing that. So I blink Horrific a Ho Yi. He tries to turn on me. He's dealing a lot less when I Horrific him. So it can be a option that you can switch out Blink and Horrific versus Blink and Thorns. And then Sunder is much less priority for a diver because you're trying to kill the squishies, like we said. But sometimes you come to the conclusion that you can't kill the backliner and you have to turn on the frontliners. So having Blink and Sunder together is very much a powerful strategy to go on these diver characters so that you have options. Options are very important on whether you kill the frontliners or the backliners. And boom! That'll do it for our divers. Only other thing to talk about is the 500 potions. On these guys, you're probably going to buy it a little bit earlier when you're exclusively looking to dive, just to increase your kill potential by a little bit more. But especially on Guardians, those 500 pots aren't as impactful because their scaling typically isn't as high. Some Guardian abilities do have really high scaling, like Kuzenbo 3 has, I believe it's 35% scaling, and then you can hit 3 times with that, so that's 105% scaling. Quite high for a Guardian ability, but most Guardian abilities aren't doing that, so just look at your Guardian and see if, read their stats, see how much scaling they have on each ability, and you'll be able to get a higher estimation of how much a 500 pot will do for you. But of course, that 10 pen is also very good. A lot of the time, though, it does. You will find yourself at a point where that 500 gold is better to just invest in items. So more of a like snowball or like I really need the power spike right now type of item for Guardians is the 500 pot. And then you're buying your wards, you're buying your 300 or 3k defense pots. And that is gonna do it for our Diver Guardians. Got through that one in record time, about 15 minutes. Whereas the other one took about 50 minutes. Like I said, a lot of shared knowledge between those two builds, which is why there are only two builds, because Guardians are very, very similar in what they accomplish. It's just the spacing of the characters, which is different depending on their kits, that makes the item choice different. So I hope you guys learned a lot from this building video. It was very in-depth. Tried to explain every item as best as I could in different scenarios. We might have missed one or two. If you have any questions, definitely drop them down in the comments. The only building video we have left to do is the mage video. So that one will be coming out within the next couple of weeks at the latest, I would hope. I still need to mess around with more mages. I haven't been playing a lot of them recently, honestly. That's the main reason why the Guardians and Mage video haven't been out or gotten made and released yet, is because I haven't been as confident in the builds as I want to be before I make a guide on videos. So, or guide on the characters. Yeah, something like that. But yeah, hope you guys enjoyed this one. Don't forget to leave a like on the video and subscribe to the channel. Really helps me out if you enjoyed. And yeah, I'll see you in the next one. Have a great rest of your day.